All right, let's get this over with. I mean, no, this is a great hobby to have. I absolutely love it. Metallica, Ride the Lightning, 1984. Let's get it. So one thing I will say about this album is that it was a lot different from the previous one in terms of song structure and lyrical content. And I feel like a lot of that had to do with Cliff Burton's heightened involvement in the making of this album. One second. Fuck. His influence was a lot more evident in this album than the last one, Kill 'Em All, and I think that can really be seen in the level of music theory that was incorporated in it. And this also had to do with the level of involvement that some of the other sound engineers and producers had in the making of this album as well. But yeah, at this point, I would say that the band as a whole was very talented, but none of them were really trained musicians. They were just guys that had a lot of raw talent. And I think Cliff's level of knowledge in regards to classical music theory and just his classical music background in general played a large role in what this album ended up being. So this album had the classic struggle aesthetics and backstory. They were broke, they crashed on fans' couches while they were touring, they could barely afford food, and at one point, even some of their equipment was stolen.
So really nothing to complain about.
But overall, this album is very different from the previous one in some very significant ways. As far as personnel, it's the same as the last one. You had James on lead guitar and rhythm guitar. He also plays some acoustic guitar as well. You had Kirk on lead guitar. You had Cliff on bass guitar. And you had Lars on drums. And of course, I don't need to mention just how talented and phenomenal of a drummer Lars has always been throughout his career. Anybody that tries to argue against that just doesn't know what they're talking about. So let's get to the songs. Track number one. Track number one, Fight Fire with Fire. This song really was vastly different than anything Metallica had put out previous to it, especially anything that we had heard on the previous album. In my opinion, it sounds like something off of a Skyrim soundtrack or a Fable soundtrack. Starts off pretty slow, but it quickly speeds up. You see those tempo changes that Metallica did a lot at this point in their careers. And those iconic, heavily distorted chugging guitars, they do eventually appear in the song, and it kind of gets back up to speed. Ultimately, I'm not a huge fan of this song. I think it does its job though. It's a good song because it showcases the broad range of what you're gonna see on this album, but I don't really think it's exceptional in any one area. Aside from the solo being very good, which is just what you come to expect from Metallica at this point in their careers. Track number two, Ride the Lightning. Starts out with some screeching guitar tones, which is very nice. It's a pretty creative song lyrically, especially for the time being. Lyrics revolve around someone falsely accused of murder, and they're sitting on death row, awaiting execution. Solo is a lot more melodic than anything we heard on the previous album, Kill 'Em All, so it definitely fits this album a lot more than it would have on the previous one. And it fits. This song is very slowed down, and overall the song has some pretty good slowed down progressions as well. Track number three, For Whom the Bell Tolls. I think this is the part of the album, because you're on the third track at this point. This is the part of the album where you really start to understand that everything in comparison to their debut album is going to be slowed down very significantly across this album. It's definitely got a lot of thrash elements, and you see that in pretty much every song. But overall, everything is a lot more melodic. Everything's a lot slower in a lot of different areas. But in regards to this specific song, Cliff Burton really does a phenomenal job. Again, it's one of those times where he's playing the intro and it sounds like a guitar because he's using heavy distortion, he's using a wah-wah pedal, but it's not, it's a bass. And I just really appreciate the technical musicianship that he brought to the genre. I don't think that can be overstated. And it's also worth mentioning that Lars on drums absolutely kills this song. I mean, it is just so hard to play. It's 10 out of 10. It is just an absolute beast of a song to play. Track number four, Fade to Black. This song, I mean, this is the song where we see James, This is a song where we hear James play acoustic guitar, which I thought was illegal in metal music, but I guess not. I don't know if I still agree with that. The lyrics of the song have to do with self-harm and suicide. And ultimately, I don't have a problem with songs like this. I actually really appreciate when a song can be lyrically complex and have a lot of nuance and not just be I think the lyrics are real, they talk about real life issues, and I can really respect bands that take that extra step and try to actually create something that is gonna have an effect on people. And this song, it did just that. You know, James has talked about how a lot of fans have come up to him and told him and written him letters and said that this song really helped them through some hard times. And because it has such a great, deeper meaning than a lot of tracks that they were putting out, it makes a lot of sense that there's a ton of people who hate it. It's not for everybody, but I don't hate it. Track number 5, Trapped Under Ice. So, again, it was at this point in the album that I really started to understand and appreciate that this is a very narrative-driven album. It seems like a lot of work was put into the lyrics, as well as the instrumentation as well, because they don't slouch in that regard either. But in terms of lyrical content, you really see a narrative in each and every song, and the lyrics kind of have their own personal meaning in each song. There is an underlying theme of death. You kind of see that in almost all the songs, but there is no singular narrative. Wait, I just said, hold on, let me rephrase that. It's narrative driven, but it isn't a singular narrative that can be tied together. Some of the songs talk about accidental death, some of the songs talk about suicide, some of the songs talk about puppies. But yeah, it's a song about someone being trapped under ice, trying to escape, trying to call for help, but they can't. I like the song. The solos were really good, really memorable. I think everything that they did in terms of how it was structured fit what they were trying to do. I remember reading that this is a lot of riffs and different parts that they kind of threw together, an amalgamation, and tried to formulate it into one singular song. I think they did really well. Track number 6, Track number 6, Escape. Oh God. This is definitely not a polarizing song at all, not even close. There's pretty much a strong consensus in regards to Metallica fans that they absolutely love this song. No controversy, nothing like that. This song is a lot different from what you would expect from this album. It's really the one song that stands out a lot. It's kind of similar to what you would hear from a lot of hair bands at the time, hair metal bands, and I guess just like hard rock bands as well. And really, that's probably why a lot of people don't like it. I almost hate to say it because it sounds a little counterintuitive, but it's almost a little too catchy for a metal song. It's really, really hook heavy. The chorus is what kind of polarizes a lot of people. I'm in the middle. It's definitely not my favorite song on the album. We're gonna get to that very soon. But someone actually said it sounds a lot like a Black Sabbath song. It sounds a lot like something Ozzy would have done at the time. And that kind of changed my opinion a little bit, because while it isn't something that I would expect from an 80s Metallica album where I expect a lot of thrash, I am a big fan of Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath, so I can see that argument. But I'm biased. Track number 7, Creeping Death. This song's a banger. It just absolutely grooves. This song was released as a single, and if I had heard it at the time, I probably wouldn't have had a reaction because I would have been a sperm cell. I also would have gone out and bought this album immediately because I absolutely love this track. Ironically, many of the other songs on the album don't sound like it, so a little bait and switch there. But really, this song, lyrically, I think it kind of pays a little homage to the previous album. They kind of follow that same structure that you would expect from Kill 'Em All. But overall, this is not only my favorite song from the album, it's probably one of my favorite Metallica tracks of all time. Track number 8, The Call of Cthulhu. From a technical standpoint, this song is very, very good. Probably some of the best work lyrically that Metallica has ever done. And that's the closing track. I think in this album they matured a lot musically. They had some very dynamic chord progressions. Their arrangements were a lot more complex than what we had seen from them previously. And they had a lot more nuanced lyrics.
Thanks, but I hate it.
No, I'm just kidding. I actually like this album quite a bit. Kill 'Em All was a pure thrash album. I mean, it really, really fit the genre very well. This album, a lot more nuanced. I'm sure I haven't said that word in this video at all. And honestly, for me, it's kind of hard to say for sure if I would call it a thrash metal album with a lot of melodic elements or more of a melodic metal album with some thrash elements included. And I think really the fundamental difference between this and their previous debut album, because they had more than one, right, And I think really the difference, if I had to describe it, between this album and their debut album was probably the fact that for that album, I would use the word chaotic to describe it, which is in a good way, because I think thrash metal really needs to be a chaotic type of heavy metal. This album was everything but that. It was structured a lot differently. It was very melodic. I'm sure I haven't used that word at all. And really, it just had a lot of song structures that you would come to expect from more mainstream radio-friendly bands, which Metallica was not at this point, but they were getting to that level. Well, I guess they weren't really getting there just yet, but they were on the path, because this is obviously hindsight. We know where Metallica would end up. But yeah, in closing, I would definitely say this is an extremely influential album. Just like the previous one, a lot of people would say this is one of the greatest albums of all time. But with that being said, it's also very polarizing. And you know how it goes. Bands release a set of work, whether it's an album, a demo, an EP, whatever it may be. And then their work after that doesn't completely and totally fall in line with what expectations were. And so people get upset, which I can understand. There's definitely a lot of bands that I felt that way about. But I would say overall, this album gets a very, very high from me. But hey, what do I know? But you, on the other hand, I need you to go down in the comments and let me know what you think of this album. But also, in other news, I kind of do this thing where I drop multiple videos every week. So if you want to be a part of that and you like good music, because everyone agrees that metal is good music, right?
Right?
You should subscribe, because I'm doing this consistently. I'm doing metal album reviews. I might even cross over, do a little bit of punk, do a little bit of grunge, do some other genres, opera and Nordic contemporary. And honestly, I might be back sooner than you think, so maybe you should subscribe? No? Okay. But yeah, in closing, this is definitely a polarizing album. Like I said, my personal favorite song was Creeping Death. There were a couple of other bangers on there as well, but there were also some that I didn't really like. But I mean, honestly, you don't come here for my opinion anyway, so who cares? Okay, bye.
Soon after.
Honestly, I would love to be one of those YouTubers that had a nice studio and floodlights and all that stuff. But unfortunately, I don't have any of that. I live in a studio apartment. It's less than 1,000 square feet. It's actually less than 10 square feet. This is all I have. I can barely afford to edit my videos, which is why I don't really do much.
This is pretty much raw footage.
And there's actually a really sad story behind why this is, why I'm so poor and why I can't afford more than 10 feet of space. And it really goes back to the fact that
You're not subscribed.
unbelievable. I think this is the part where I like cover the camera and do that cool outro. It's like, oh, that's weird. I don't like that.
You're sitting on the couch, you're watching TV, and your life is passing you by. You keep procrastinating over and over. Well, maybe I'll
Subscribe to Dark Skin Donnie's YouTube channel.
next year, maybe next semester. No, do it right now. All you gotta do is pick up the phone and
Smash subscribe like your life depends on it.
why are you making it complicated? It's easy.